Today is May 13th, 2026, and you are about to witness the complete and irreversible demolition of the most carefully constructed celebrity narrative of the 21st century. I need you to pay very close attention, because the information I am about to share is not speculation, it is not gossip, and it is certainly not the sanitized version of reality being fed to you by the mainstream media. We are standing at a historic tipping point where the protection of elite status finally meets the immovable object of federal law. Right now, as we speak, a legal and political firestorm is incinerating the gates of the Montecito mansion. The Department of Homeland Security has, for the 100th time, issued a stonewall refusal to release the immigration records of Prince Harry. But here is the difference. Today, that silence is no longer a shield, it is a confession. This refusal from the very agency that decides who is welcomed into the United States and who is sent packing has triggered a constitutional crisis that the celebrity press is too terrified to cover. Let us go straight to the heart of the matter. United States immigration law, specifically the Immigration and Nationality Act, is not a suggestion, it is a rigid framework. Under federal law, the admission of using controlled substances, hard drugs, is an explicit, absolute ground for visa denial or immediate revocation. This is a rule that has been applied with merciless consistency to thousands upon thousands of ordinary people. Hardworking immigrants who made a single mistake 20 years ago find themselves barred, separated from their families, and cast out without a second thought. And yet, here we have a British prince who did not just use drugs in private, but who proudly, almost boastfully, documented his use of cocaine, cannabis, and magic mushrooms in his own memoir, Spare. He recorded those admissions in his own unmistakable voice for a global audience on Audible. He handed a loaded weapon to every immigration enforcement officer in this country and dared them to pull the trigger. The question for May 13th, 2026, is no longer about what Harry did. He has already confessed. The question is, why is he still here? The Heritage Foundation has been pulling at this thread for over 2 years, and today, that thread has finally unraveled the entire garment. The suspicion that a sweetheart deal was brokered by powerful allies potentially within the highest reaches of the current administration is no longer a fringe theory. It is the only rational explanation left on the table. This is a direct assault on the American principle of equal justice under law. Is there one rule for the person waiting in line at a consulate in Mexico City or Manila, and an entirely different, invisible rule for a duke residing in a 16-bedroom estate in California? Tom Bauer, the investigative giant who has spent 7 long, obsessive years following the trails that other journalists were too cowardly to touch, has just stated on the official record that this immunity is expiring. The political winds in Washington have shifted from a gentle breeze to a Category 5 hurricane, and the coastal elite exceptionalism that protected the Sussexes for so long is evaporating like morning fog. Please understand, this is not a hit piece. This is a forensic examination of a trap that is closing from multiple directions simultaneously. While the Department of Homeland Security struggles to explain its hypocrisy, the public is finally waking up to the reality of who these people are when the cameras are turned off and the PR budgets run dry. Harry's complete lack of self-awareness, what Bauer describes as the behavior of a schoolboy who did not understand the damage he was inflicting on himself, has finally caught up with him. The wall of silence that protected his residency status for years has developed a massive structural crack. And as that crack widens, it is revealing a much darker, much more expensive reality lurking just behind the visa scandal. Because while the government is looking at his papers, a much more feared agency is looking at their bank accounts. But hold that thought. The image of a federal investigator flipping through the Sussexes' immigration file because the border crisis is only the first wall to fall. What I am about to tell you regarding their actual, provable liquidity is so financially explosive that it makes a visa revocation look like a minor inconvenience. Stay with me, because the money trail is where the bodies are buried. Let us descend from the legal halls of Washington, D.C., and move directly into the counting rooms of Montecito. Because if the visa scandal is a threat to their status, the financial reality surfacing today, May 13th, 2026, is a threat to their very existence. There is an old saying in investigative journalism, follow the money. But when it comes to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, the challenge is no longer following the money, it is finding where the money has gone. Tom Bauer has documented the Sussex financial trajectory with the quiet, relentless precision of a surgeon, and his findings are devastating. To understand the gravity of the situation, we must first look at the floor, the absolute baseline cost of being Harry and Meghan in America. Between the mortgage on a 16-bedroom estate, a private security detail that operates 24 hours a day, international legal fees, and a global public relations apparatus. Their annual expenditure is estimated at a minimum of £3 million after tax. Think about that number. £3 million just to keep the lights on and the gates closed. This is not a luxury budget. This is the cost of their survival as a brand. And yet, as we stand here in the spring of 2026, the revenue streams that were supposed to fund this lifestyle for decades have not just slowed down, they have effectively evaporated. The Netflix deal, once heralded as a $100 million partnership that would redefine digital storytelling, has collapsed. It did not end with a celebratory press release or a graceful transition. It ended because, as the data now proves, the global audience moved on. The documentary series was a one-time peak of curiosity that quickly curdled into fatigue. When Netflix, a corporation that survives on engagement metrics, realizes that your brand no longer attracts new subscribers, they do not renew. They cut their losses. Then we must look at the Spotify catastrophe. $20 million was the reported price tag for a partnership that yielded a measly 12 episodes of a podcast before the platform's own executives publicly labeled the couple as grifters. In the world of high finance and entertainment, that label is a death sentence. It is a signal to every other major studio that the Sussexes are high-maintenance, low-yield assets. But perhaps the most telling sign of their desperation is the jam. The launch of American Riviera Orchard was supposed to be Meghan's transformation into a domestic goddess, a modern-day Martha Stewart. We saw the influencers, the hand-numbered jars, and the meticulously lit photographs of strawberry preserves. But in the cold light of 2026, the venture has failed to achieve any meaningful commercial momentum. You cannot fund a £3 million annual lifestyle by selling artisanal jam to a dwindling circle of celebrities. It is a mathematical impossibility. This leads us to a terrifying question that forensic accountants and tax attorneys are now asking out loud. If the visible income has vanished, who is paying for the private jets? Who is paying for the designer wardrobes that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per season? And most importantly, what is the IRS seeing when they compare the reported earnings of their various LLCs against the ostentatious, multi-million-dollar lifestyle they display to the world? In the United States, the Internal Revenue Service is the most feared financial enforcement agency in history. They do not care about titles, and they certainly do not care about victimhood narratives. They care about the yawning gap. When a household displays a level of luxury that far exceeds its provable income for 2 or 3 consecutive tax years, it triggers an automated, implacable process. Tom Bauer's prophecy from 2 years ago is now manifesting in real time. He warned that they were burning through their cash at a rate that was fundamentally unsustainable. He saw the liquidity crisis coming while the rest of the world was distracted by their television interviews. Today, the burn rate has finally met the bottom of the barrel. The Sussexes are currently trapped in a classic gilded cage paradox. To maintain their relevance, they must appear wealthy and successful. But the cost of appearing wealthy and Than Kung is exactly what is bankrupting them. They are performing for a global audience that is increasingly bored, while their creditors and the federal government are watching from the front row with calculators in hand. The financial collapse of a celebrity brand is rarely a sudden explosion. It is a slow, grinding erosion. It starts with a canceled contract, moves to a failed product launch, and ends with the quiet sale of assets. But for Harry and Meghan, the stakes are infinitely higher. Their wealth was their independence. Without the money, Harry is not an international leader. He is a man who cannot afford his own security. Without the money, Meghan is not a lifestyle mogul. She is a former actress with a very expensive mortgage. As the walls of the IRS and the reality of the market close in, the pressure within the Montecito mansion must be unbearable. But as dire as the financial picture looks, it is actually the least of their problems. Because while the money is disappearing, the secrets of how they reached the top are beginning to surface. Stay with me, because the next layer of this investigation takes us away from the bank statements and back to the sun-drenched decks of private yachts in the Mediterranean, where the true origin story of Meghan Markle was written in ink that was never supposed to be permanent. The financial erosion we have just witnessed is merely the structural failure of the present, but to understand the impending total collapse, we must look backward. We must look into the years that have been systematically scrubbed, sanitized, and deleted from the digital record. Today, on May 13th, 2026, the industrial strength filters that once protected the official narrative of Meghan Markle are failing, and the light is finally hitting the period known among serious researchers as the Mediterranean years. Before the world knew her as a Duchess, before the cable television success of Suits, and long before the meticulously crafted image of the humanitarian activist, there was a different Meghan Markle. This version of the story does not involve avocado toast or wellness blogs. It involves the high-stakes, ultra-discreet world of the international yacht circuit, a shadowy network of influence, access, and proximity to power that operates on the sun-drenched decks of private vessels, cruising from the Amalfi Coast to the Greek islands. For years, the suggestion that Meghan was a frequent guest on these private, unregistered super yachts was dismissed by the mainstream media as a fringe conspiracy theory, a misogynistic invention of the trolls. But as we sit here in the spring of 2026, that dismissal has become impossible to maintain. Reliable investigative sources and credentialed media figures are no longer asking if she was part of that world. They are asking about the scale. Was the number of elite vessels she frequented in double or triple figures? This is not a question of leisure. It is a question of engineered access. The yacht circuit is one of the most effective, unrecorded ways for an ambitious woman with beauty and drive to network her way into rooms or onto decks where billionaires, producers, and global power brokers reside. It is a world where resumes do not matter, but associations do. Tom Bower, with his characteristic forensic bluntness, has described Meghan's central defining feature as total ruthlessness, paired with huge ambition. This ambition did not begin in 2016. It was a decades-long campaign of social ascent that required the purging of anyone and anything that no longer served the climb. Look at the digital footprint, or rather, the lack of one. Why was the TIG deleted so abruptly? Tarsau were social media posts from her years in Europe, and the Mediterranean scrubbed with the precision of a crime scene cleaner long before the public even knew her name. Professionals do not delete history unless that history contradicts the future they are trying to sell. Which brings us to the very foundation of the Sussex saga, the Soho House meeting. The world has been fed a romantic myth for nearly 10 years, a fairy tale of two people who locked eyes across a crowded room on a blind date and changed history. It is a beautiful story, but in the cold light of 2026, the fairy tale is being exposed as a highly sophisticated operation. Central to this operation is a name that recurs like a ghost in every dark corner of this investigation: Marcus Anderson. A man of immense, quiet influence within the Soho House inner circle, Anderson has remained one of the few individuals Meghan has never ghosted. While family members, childhood friends, and former colleagues have been discarded with clinical efficiency, Marcus Anderson remains. Why? In the world of intelligence and high-level social engineering, the person who survives every call is usually the one who knows how the machinery was built. The question being asked today by researchers who have spent years analyzing flight manifests and photographic timestamps is simple. Was the meeting between Harry and Meghan a stroke of luck, or was it a precision strike? Was Harry, an emotionally vulnerable prince, publicly longing for a mother figure and a sense of purpose, the target of a long-term play? Tom Bower's research suggests that Meghan's pre-Harry history was not a series of random events, but a calculated progression through the upper reaches of international society. The Med years provided the training ground, the yacht circuit provided the access, and the Soho House network provided the final, fatal introduction. When you look at the photographs that are now beginning to surface, images that have been meticulously analyzed frame by frame by digital forensics experts, you see a woman who was comfortable in contexts that the official royal narrative would never dare to acknowledge. You see a woman who understood power long before she possessed it. If the meeting was engineered, and if the Mediterranean years involved associations that were incompatible with the dignity of the British crown, then the entire Sussex marriage is not a love story. It is a breach of security. It is a narrative remix designed to grant a woman of limited talent but limitless ambition the ultimate global stage. But as we peel back the layers of the Soho House myth, we find that the original sin of this story is not just about where she was, but who she claimed to be. Because the secrets of the Mediterranean are now colliding with a much more personal, much more biological set of questions. Stay with me, because as we move into part 4, we are going to look at the one thing no PR firm can ever truly fix: the records of time itself. We are going to look at the age gap and the biological anomalies that have left the palace reeling, and the researchers demanded the truth. As we continue this forensic deep dive on May 13th, 2026, we move from the external shadows of the Mediterranean to the internal fabric of the Sussex narrative itself. We are entering a territory that the mainstream media has long treated as off-limits, not because the questions lack merit, but because the answers threaten to invalidate every biographical document issued by the Sussex camp. We must talk about the age factor and the biological anomalies that have left researchers and royal historians in a state of quiet, documented disbelief. In the world of celebrity branding, age is often treated as a flexible concept. But in the world of the British monarchy, where the line of succession is governed by the cold, hard reality of birth dates and biological lineage, a discrepancy of even a few months is a constitutional crisis. What if the discrepancy is not months, but 6 years? For years, the official record has stated that Meghan Markle was born in 1981. However, the work of serious researchers, bolstered by the persistent and detailed testimony of her own half-sister, Samantha Markle, suggests a radically different timeline. Samantha has been consistent, vocal, and specific. She recalls being 11 years old in 1975 when the family was living in Chicago, and she insists that the biological gap between her and Meghan is far smaller than the official narrative claims. Why does a 6-year difference matter on May 13th, 2026? Because when you shift the birth year from 1981 to 1975, the entire house of cards begins to wobble. It changes the medical feasibility of the official birth narratives for Archie and Lilibet. It changes the timeline of her Mediterranean years. And most importantly, it exposes a fundamental willingness to manipulate the most basic facts of identity to serve a marketable image. This leads us to the most sensitive and most guarded chapter of the Sussex saga, the births of the children. Let us be clear. This is not about the children themselves, who are innocent parties in this global drama. This is about the anomalies in the public record. In the history of the House of Windsor, royal births are governed by ancient, rigid protocols designed to ensure the legitimacy of the line of succession. There are the steps of the Lindo wing, the formal announcements signed by attending physicians, and a level of transparency. The Sussex approach to the arrivals of Archie and Lilibet was not just private, it was a total departure from every established precedent. On May 13th, 2026, we are still looking for the standard documentation that accompanies any other royal birth. There are no signed medical certificates from the attending doctors made public in the traditional manner. There are no formal, verified photographic timelines that satisfy the requirements of royal historians. Instead, we have a series of narrative anomalies. Researchers have pointed to the shifting stories regarding the hospital location, the timing of the announcements, and the conspicuous absence of the royal household staff in the verification process. When Tom Bower describes Meghan's ambition as total ruthlessness, we must ask if that ruthlessness extended to the engineering of a lineage that the British public was forced to accept without the traditional proofs. Furthermore, we must address the Mediterranean link to this biological puzzle. There are those who have spent years investigating the possibility that the official version of these births was designed to obscure a different reality, one involving surrogacy or a different biological timeline that would have complicated the children's status within the line of succession. Under British law, a child must be born of the body to inherit titles and a place in the succession. Any deviation from this, if proven, would not just be a scandal, it would be a legal nullification of their royal standing. Tom Bower has noted that Meghan's life is a series of chapters, each one more carefully edited than the last. But you cannot edit the laws of biology, and you cannot permanently delete the memories of those who knew you before the royal remix began. People from the school she attended in the mid-80s have provided independent documentation that aligns more closely with the 1975 birth year than the official one. If the foundation of her identity, her very age, is a construction, then every statement she has made about her struggles, her career, and her journey is cast in a suspicious light. It suggests a woman who does not just live a life, but scripts one. But as the questions about her past and her children's origins intensify, the most immediate threat to the Sussexes is not a researcher with a birth certificate. It is the person who saw the script being written in real time and refused to play her part. Stay with me because in Part 5, we move from the biological to the institutional. We are going to examine the cold fury of the Princess of Wales and the moment the future King of England decided that the Sussex project had to be neutralized. As we move deeper into the final hours of this investigation on May 13th, 2026, we must confront the most personal and strategically devastating wall closing in on the Sussexes. This is not a wall built of legal filings or bank statements, but of character and institutional resolve. It is the story of the cold fury of Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and the moment the future King of England, Prince William, decided that the survival of the monarchy outweighed the bond of a brother. For years, the celebrity press has attempted to frame the relationship between Catherine and Meghan as a petty rivalry, a catfight between two glamorous women. This narrative is not only lazy, it is a profound misunderstanding of the stakes involved. Today, serious sources close to the palace are finally speaking the truth that the PR machines tried to suppress. Catherine did not feel threatened by Meghan Markle. She did not feel jealous of a younger, more vocal newcomer. What Catherine felt was a quiet, bone-deep fury. To understand why, you must look at what Catherine has sacrificed over the last 15 years. She has spent more than a decade doing the patient, invisible, and often deeply unglamorous work that actually sustains an ancient institution. She has spent cold Tuesday mornings in community centers and sat through thousands of hours of diplomatic protocol without a single complaint. She understood the cost of admission to the House of Windsor and paid it every single day with the dedication of a nun. And then Meghan Markle arrived. According to the meticulous documentation provided by Tom Bower, Meghan made it clear within the first 5 minutes that she had zero intention of paying those dues. She did not want to serve, she wanted to reign. She was reportedly furious that her and Harry's residence at Kensington Palace was smaller than William and Catherine's. She believed, with an arrogance that left the household staff reeling, that she, a former cable actress with no understanding of British history, deserved the top spot immediately. This was not fresh air for the monarchy. It was an insult to everything Catherine had worked to build. Catherine saw through the activist mask within weeks. She saw a woman who viewed the royal family not as a lifetime of service, but as a global platform for her own brand. The cold fury of the Princess of Wales was the reaction of a professional watching an amateur try to dismantle a 1,000-year legacy for a few likes on social media. But Catherine was not alone. Prince William's instincts as a future king are legendary for their sharpness. He saw the threat to the crown from a mile away. He pulled Harry aside and told him directly, brother to brother, that he was moving too fast, that there were elements of Meghan's character and history that were deeply concerning. Harry, caught in a web of his own emotional vulnerabilities and his desperate longing for a mother figure, chose to see this as a betrayal. On May 13th, 2026, we can now confirm that William's warnings were not born of malice, but of intelligence. He knew about the Mediterranean years. He knew about the yacht circuit whispers that were already reaching the palace's security teams. He knew that the woman Harry was bringing into the inner sanctum of the monarchy was someone who had ghosted her own father and every other person who had outlived their usefulness to her. The institutional reckoning began when the Sussexes decided to take their grievances to global television. They believed that by painting Catherine and William as cold and racist, they could destroy the couple's popularity and elevate themselves as the people's royals. It was a monumental miscalculation. They did not realize that Catherine's decade of silent service had built a reservoir of trust with the public that no Oprah interview could ever drain. Today, the tide has turned completely. While the Sussexes are trapped in a liquidity crisis and a visa scandal in California, the Prince and Princess of Wales have never been more secure in their roles. The cold fury has transitioned into a cold neutralization. William has reportedly overseen the creation of a dossier of truth, a comprehensive record of every lie, every manipulation, and every institutional breach committed by the Sussexes. This is the nuclear option that the palace has held in reserve for years. Tom Bower's assessment is that the Sussexes believed their celebrity status made them untouchable. They thought they were the future. But as we look at the ruins of their brand today, it is clear that they were merely a temporary distraction. The monarchy is a marathon, and the Sussexes ran a sprint that left them exhausted and bankrupt before the first 5 miles were over. But as the institutional doors in London are locked and bolted against them, the final act of this drama is shifting back to America. The elite immunity they once enjoyed is gone. And as we move into part 6, we are going to look at the day of reckoning, the moment when all of these forces collide into a single, devastating reality that Harry and Meghan can no longer outrun. We have reached the endgame. Today, on May 13th, 2026, the separate threads of this investigation, the visa fraud, the liquidity crisis, the manufactured origins, and the institutional betrayal have finally converged into a single, devastating reality. The Montecito Fortress, once a symbol of defiance and global celebrity, has become a gilded prison where the occupants are running out of time, money, and allies. This is the day of reckoning that Tom Bower and every serious researcher knew was inevitable. The most terrifying aspect of this collapse for Harry and Meghan is the loss of their elite immunity. For 7 long years, they operated under the assumption that their titles, their connections to the American political establishment, and their mastery of the victimhood narrative made them untouchable. They believed they could openly admit to federal crimes, smear the future King and Queen of England, and manipulate their own biographies without ever facing a meaningful consequence. But on this Wednesday in May 2026, that immunity has expired. In Washington, D.C., the Department of Homeland Security is no longer able to maintain its wall of silence. The legal pressure from the Heritage Foundation, combined with a shifting political landscape that is increasingly hostile to coastal elite exceptionalism, has forced a breakthrough. The question of whether Harry lied on his visa application is no longer a debate for cable news, it is a matter for federal investigators. If it is proven that he received preferential treatment despite his public admissions of drug use, the Sussex American existence ends overnight. A British prince being deported from the United States would be the single most humiliating diplomatic event of the century, and the mechanism for that humiliation is now in motion. Simultaneously, the financial mirage has dissipated. The IRS does not care about Archwell's mission statements or Meghan's lifestyle branding. They care about the £3 million annual burn rate that has no visible source of legitimate income. The forensic accountants have followed the trail from the cancelled Netflix contracts to the failed product launches, and they have found a yawning gap that cannot be explained away with a wellness blog post. The liquidity crisis is no longer a private struggle. It is a public funeral for their commercial viability. When the money goes, the entourage goes, the security goes, and the power to control the narrative goes with them. But the most tattered part of the fortress is the Sussex origin story. The Mediterranean years, the yacht circuit, and the Soho House operation are no longer secrets buried in a deleted blog. They are now part of the public record, supported by photographic evidence and the testimonies of those who are no longer afraid of a Duchess who has lost her sting. The image of Meghan as the innocent activist has been replaced by the reality of a woman who utilized every tool of social engineering to capture a vulnerable prince. Prince William's dossier of truth is the final weight that will shatter the house of cards. The palace has remained silent for years, following the never complain, never explain mantra. But as we have seen on May 13, 2026, that silence was actually a period of meticulous preparation. The institutional reckoning is here. The British monarchy is moving forward with Catherine and William as its bedrock, while the Sussexes are being systematically erased from the official future of the crown. They are no longer senior royals or global ambassadors. They are a cautionary tale of what happens when ambition is not tempered by service. Tom Bower's final assessment of the Sussex saga is as brutal as it is accurate. A woman of huge ambition and total ruthlessness, and a man who did not understand the damage he was inflicting on himself. They thought they could remix the monarchy for the digital age, but they forgot that the monarchy is built on 1,000 years of survival. While a celebrity brand can be destroyed in 14 days of bad press and a single federal audit, as the sun sets over the Pacific on this fateful day, the question is no longer will they survive, but what will be left? Once the private jets stop flying and the lawyers stop filing suits, what remains is a middle-aged man who has alienated his family and a woman who has ghosted the world. The day of reckoning is not just about the loss of titles or money. It is about the ultimate poverty of a life built on a narrative of deceit. Harry and Meghan believed they were the magnum opus of the 21st century. Instead, they have become a footnote, a warning to anyone who believes that fame is a substitute for character. The trap is closed. The truth is out. And for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, there is no one left to call for a rescue. Thank you for staying with me through this exhaustive examination. You will never look at the Sussex saga the same way again, because once you see the single devastating picture, the fairy tale can never be reconstructed. Let this be the final word on the demolition of a narrative that was never meant to last.